And welcome back to Hannity as we continue with former Alaska Governor, Fox News contributor Sarah Palin. All right, so how do you like the idea Julianne Moore will be playing you in an HBO upcoming movie? Your thoughts?
Well, I am all about job creation, and I guess I could provide some of these gals who pretend like they're me some job security. I would ask, though, if they're of the mind of spreading the wealth around, that perhaps they want to spring for one of my kids' sets of braces or something as they capitalize on pretending to be me.
Well, she doesn't really look. I mean, she's a good actress. I thought Courtney Cox, Demi Moore might be a little closer look. No.
Oh, well, I'm absolutely flattered that you would say that, but no, I don't know. I think I'll just grit my teeth and bear whatever comes, what may, with that movie. All
right, let me move on to one serious issue. Newt Gingrich seems to be gearing up. He's going to be running. Tim Pawlenty's going to be running. Rick Santorum's going to be running. Mitt Romney looks like he's going to be running, and any number of other people. And I know a lot of people are wondering, is Governor Palin getting closer to making a decision?
Still contemplating it, Sean, because, you know, it's such obviously a huge life-changing decision to be made. But there are some extremely difficult situations that our country is facing today, and unless I have the confidence that we have a GOP candidate who is out there willing to tackle these issues regardless of what perhaps some special interests or ties that they may have had in the past to these special interests, if those influence decisions that are being made, unless I'm confident that there is a GOP candidate who can tackle these things and provide solutions, then yeah, seriously, I'll continue to think about it and offer myself up in the name of service. But as I tell you, Sean, national security issues and impending self-imposed energy crisis that is looming, and the fiscal crisis that we face because of a $14 trillion debt and this practice of deficit spending, those are the things that are going to bring America to her knees. So we certainly need the strong, tough, smart leadership that hopefully a GOP candidate can bring.
Does that mean that maybe you would wait a little bit longer and see who gets in the race and then make a decision based on who's in there, whether or not you think you could do a better job?
You know, and that thinking along those lines is unconventional for me because I have never waited for anybody else to line up and then I jump in at the end. In fact, in my races over the last 20 years, I've usually been the first one to jump in. But in this case, because it is so monumental and so affecting on a family, I probably would wait to see who is willing to put their name forward in the hat in terms of serving this country. And if I'm confident that there are people in there who can engage in healthy debate and a contested, strong primary, then that would go into my thinking as to whether or not to run.
All right, well, we're going to continue to follow the process with you. All right, we just talked about Wisconsin. We talked about NPR. We see that states are facing huge, massive budget deficits. We see the price of oil, which you mentioned, is going up. We have the federal budget deficit. As the Republicans now battle over last year's budget, they want to cut $61 billion. The Democrats only want to cut $4.5 billion of a $3.7 trillion budget with a $1.6 billion trillion dollar deficit. My question is, how do you feel that they are doing, the Republicans now, including the new freshmen, that many of whom you campaigned for? Do you think it's enough by waiting till next year for the bigger cuts in the spending, or should they be doing it now?
Now, I'm kind of embarrassed for some in the GOP for them to be assuming that the American public believes that this is a serious discussion when we're talking only about $54 billion in cuts that they have on the table. Certainly that's better than the $4 billion that the Democrats are proposing. But no, we need to be looking more along the lines of a Rand Paul $500 billion cut. And granted that's a more long term than just these continuing resolutions and the cuts that we need to make there to sustain our government. But no, we need much greater cuts and a more pro-growth development, pro-industry agenda being plugged into these budgets in these coming days, certainly much more than the $60 billion or $54 billion cut that's on the table.
So in essence, are you disappointed then that when Paul Ryan was on this program, he said, all right, we got to deal with last year's business because the Democrats didn't pass a budget. But he says in April they're going to deal with entitlement reform, deal with the bigger cuts. Do you think politically it would be advantageous? Mike Pence says, you know, let's have a fight right now. Do you think they should fight for all the cuts they want now and not wait till next year?
Absolutely. They need to be bold and strong, and they need those still spines, and they need to keep Americans believing that the GOP principles will be able to be those things when they're plugged in appropriately to get the economy back on the right track. We're going to lose faith in the party if we just take these little tiny baby steps, you know, million here, billion there, to start ratcheting down a $14 trillion debt. No, we need to bite off some big chunks today, and if that takes a fight, then hopefully the GOP leadership is willing to fight for America's future.
It seems like there's a political calculation out there that if the Democrats, it seems like they were pushing for a government shutdown because I think they thought that it'd be advantageous. The president punted when he presented his budget. And do you think they're being timid because they're afraid of this idea that they'll be blamed if the government shuts down? Do you think it would be the right thing to shut the government down, at least non-essential services, while they fight for those? Again, I agree with you. I think billions are nothing compared to the trillions. Do you think that maybe they're just making a political calculation here?
Well, they certainly should not be assuming that capitulating to this president who seems quite disinterested, really, in what the debt is going to do to our country. If the president were more interested in it, I think he would be the one showing the leadership skills that are needed in order to start ratcheting down the debt, and we're not seeing that from President Obama. So hopefully the GOP knows that, through the midterm elections, we elected even more Republicans in order to engage in an agenda that would put the country back on the right track. So now, hopefully they're strong enough, they're bold enough to do what the American public has sent them to Washington to do. That's get the economy back on the right track by cutting spending and allowing more of a pro-growth, pro-private sector agenda to be engaged in D.C.
All right, Governor, good to see you. Thank you so much for being with us. We really appreciate it.
Thanks so much.
And coming up, tension was high on Capitol Hill today during a hearing on the radicalization of American Muslims. The man who led the charge, Congressman Pete King, who's under fire. He joins us with reaction coming up next. Now, few hearings on Capitol Hill have generated as much fire and fury from the left as the one that took place earlier today. The hearing called by Congressman Peter King on the radicalization of Muslims in America. And here is how Congressman King addressed the controversy as the hearing began.
I am well aware that the announcement of these hearings has generated considerable controversy and opposition. Let me make it clear today that I remain convinced that these hearings must go forward, and they will. To back down would be a craven surrender to political correctness and an abdication of what I believe to be the main responsibility of this committee, to protect America from a terrorist attack.
And as you can imagine, the hearings have generated major blowback from Democrats. Those in attendance made their anger apparent and voiced some outrageous claims while doing so.
This committee's approach to this particular subject, I believe, is contrary to the best of American values and threatens our security. This is the very heart of stereotyping and scapegoating.
Muslim Americans are honorable citizens, loyal Americans, and they're as much distressed as we are about what it is we see going on.
I cannot help but wonder how propaganda about this hearing focuses on American Muslim community will be used by those who seek to inspire a new generation of suicide bombers.
And joining me now with reaction is the man behind today's hearing, New York Congressman Pete King. Congressman, good to see you.
Sean, always great to be with you.
All right, you talked in the lead up to this about the mindless hysteria leading into the hearings. You just heard some of the criticism. You've been listening to it all day, and I wanted to give you a chance to respond. From everything that I've been reading, you're not going after the Muslim community. We lost 3,000 Americans on 9/11. What are these hearings about?
Sean, this is about the radicalization of the Muslim American community by al-Qaeda. This is exactly what the President's National Security Advisor said last week. The fact is the overwhelming majority of Muslim Americans are outstanding Americans. But al-Qaeda is attempting to recruit within that community. And as we brought out at the hearing today, where it was Muslims who were testifying, they showed how their children were being radicalized. In one case, sent to Somalia and murdered. And when they went to their leaders in the Muslim community for assistance, they were denied it. They were attacked themselves. They were threatened. They were told they'd be sent to Guantanamo if they went to the police. They were warned not to cooperate with the FBI. They were told they would burn in hell if they cooperated, and they were shunned. They were isolated within their own community because they wanted to find out what happened to their sons who were murdered. And they were recruited in the mosques. They were sent over there by imams, and yet their own community, the leaders in their own community, failed to protect them. So I want to protect the entire country from an al-Qaeda type attack led by radicalized Muslim Americans, and also protect the Muslims themselves living in this community who are being preyed upon by al-Qaeda.
By the way, and the American people support you by a 52-38 margin. In USA Today, there was a poll that support these hearings. Do we know, Congressman, are there people, radicalized, al-Qaeda sympathizing, terrorists in this country right now? Do we know for a fact that they're here?
Well, we know that they have been radicalized. Just in the last year, we had the attempted subway bombing in New York. We had Shahzad, the Times Square bomber. We had Major Hassan. And we know that al-Qaeda, yes, is actively recruiting here in this country. And that is what I was addressing today, how that is going to be coped with by the Muslim community, whether or not they're fully cooperating with police and law enforcement, and whether or not instead organizations like CARE, the Committee on American-Islamic Relations, which is an unindicted co-conspirator in a major terrorist case, whether or not they're the ones who are out front. So, no, there's no doubt. And even the White House will admit this. I mean, this is what Dennis McDonough said last week. This threat is real, this is serious, and it is al-Qaeda attempting to recruit Muslim Americans and being successful over the last several years.
Well, we know that even Attorney General Holder himself admitted to lying awake at night, worrying about the radicalization of young Muslim men in America. We know the vast majority of terrorist attacks aimed at Americans are from people and groups associated with militant Islam. That's irrefutable. Let me go to the emotional testimony of your colleague, Keith Ellison, and let's play this, and I have a couple of questions on the other side.
Mr. Hamdani bravely sacrificed his life to try to help others on 9/11. After the tragedy, some people tried to smear his character solely because of his Islamic faith. Some people spread false rumors and speculated that he was in league with the attackers because he was a Muslim. But it was only when his remains were identified that these lies were exposed.
Now, Congressman, I have a very important question, because he talked about smearing this man's character because of his Islamic faith and spreading false rumors and et cetera, et cetera. I have a piece that's just been put up on National Review Online, and in fact, when Congress signed the Patriot Act into law, they included this line: many Arab Americans and Muslim Americans acted heroically during the attacks on the United States, including the gentleman that Mr. Ellison is talking about. And they actually mentioned him by name, and when they did a Google search of smears and lies and attacks and all of this, they couldn't find these examples that he was talking about, but I think for one. And it was even, it was just a question raised more than anything else. Are you aware that, do you suspect that what he was saying today was not accurate?
You know, I don't know, Congressman Ellison. I was quite frank. You know, I invited him to testify to give him the opportunity. No one was questioning him. No one was giving him a hard time. You know, I'm not going to question his motives or whether it's real or not. I'm not aware of the case he was talking about. But, Sean, you know, you and I were in New York after September 11th. I didn't hear anyone say anything negative about Muslims, certainly about any Muslim in the police department, anyone who lost his life that day. And the Muslims do perform heroically in police departments. They performed heroically in the military. So, and even that testimony today, what did that have to do with the hearing today?
Right. Let me ask you one last question.
Yeah.
What did you think of the NPR in this meeting where they were willing to accept money from the Muslim Brotherhood and even, you know, a group on their website to talk, they wanted to make America Sharia compliant? NPR wanted that money.
Well, I'm not surprised, Sean. NPR, we should cut off funding to them. NPR is a left-wing tool, just like the New York Times is a left-wing rag. I mean, the fact is, at least the New York Times is not getting federal subsidies. There should be no money given to NPR. Last year with Juan Williams, that was a metaphor for how biased and really out of touch with the American people NPR is. That not one taxpayer dollar should go to NPR.
All right, Congressman, we support your investigation. It's not against the Muslim community. It's to seek if there are extremists that want to destroy our way of life. We appreciate your time, and thanks for being with us.
Thank you, Sean.
And let not your heart be troubled. Our great, great, great American panel is next.